Everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kara, and today we are going to be talking about the books that I read in February. I read a lot of them. I read 13 to be precise, which is kind of insane because February is the shortest month of the year, and so I was not expecting to read 13 books in 29 days, but I did. So I don't really have anything else to say about that. I'm off to a good start. I'm way ahead of my goal for this year so far, which is great. So let's just go ahead and get into the first book that I read in February, which was The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. This one is such a no-brainer for me. I've been wanting to get around to it for a long time, but I kind of was saving it for a rainy day when I was feeling uninspired or like I needed a little bit of a pick-me-up. And I was, well, we'll get into it a little bit later, but I started a book that I knew I wasn't going to finish anytime soon, and so I was like, well, might as well pick something up to finish for the first book of February, much like I did last month. So that was The Tea Dragon Society. I decided after some heavier reads in January it would be good to give me something of somewhat of a palate cleanser, and I was right. This graphic novel follows the story of Greta. Greta's family are blacksmiths, and so she is learning that trade, but she's not sure if that's what she wants to do with her life. And one day, while she's out about town, she rescues a tea dragon from peril, and she returns the tea dragon to its owner, and she discovers a new profession and way of life that she's very intrigued by, and so she kind of wants to explore more of that, and she does eventually, and she gets to meet a lot of really cute interesting, adorable cast of characters, and she learns about the art of tea dragon rearing, and eventually she finds her purpose, and it was just super cute. The art was incredible. The queerness in this book was so touching, and the representation was just impeccable. And yeah, I really don't have much else to say about this. This was obviously 5 stars. It was just exactly what I needed, and I can't wait to read and see more of Kay's beautiful work. If you haven't read this one, do it now. You won't regret it. Next up, I finished the Caraval series this month. I finally got around to Legendary and Finale this month. Since I didn't really talk about Caraval in a wrap-up, but you did see it in my Reindeer Readathon vlog, and if you haven't, go ahead and check that one out. I'll just kind of talk about the series here as a whole and let you know what my thoughts were as the cohesive series wraps up this month. All of the books are interdependent, but they're all also very similar. So I feel like whatever I say about Legendary and Finale are that I have kind of the same thoughts about them. I'd say Caraval started off the strongest. Legendary was like my second favorite. I think they all go in order of the series. Caraval was my favorite, Legendary was my next favorite, and Finale was like my least favorite of the series. Finale was kind of a mess plot-wise, actually, but I guess by then you're so invested in the series that you can look past the plot holes and the pacing issues and everything weird that's going on. I was really scratching my head trying to figure out how this was going to wrap up while I was reading Legendary, and especially while I was reading Finale, because I just was like, what the hell is going on here? Obviously I can't really say much about the plot of either of those books, because if you haven't read Caraval, then you're gonna get spoiled if I talk about those. So I'm just kind of giving you my thoughts, my general thoughts. I kind of wanted to read Once Upon a Broken Heart more than this series anyway, so I'm not super heartbroken that I didn't love it, but I did like it, and I'm glad that I read it. Like, I don't regret spending time in the world of Caraval at all. I had a good time at the end of the day. I think Stephanie Garber is really gifted at description and setting, but plot kind of falls apart for her, and the characters need more exposition and more work and more just characterization, because they all kind of felt like they didn't really, like, stuff happened to them and they were fine, but I didn't really believe any of the relationships, and I thought Scarlett and Donatella were kind of the same character, even though they're not meant to be at all. But you know, this series was still pretty memorable. It was super fun. I enjoyed the writing for the most part, and it was very immersive. I really enjoyed like just diving in and being in the world while I was there. Overall, I give this series a 4-star because I feel like I enjoyed it. I don't know. So with series, it's kind of like I rate them as a whole, like when I think about them. Like for example, A Court of Thorns and Roses for me was a 4-star series, even though I definitely didn't rate any of the books 5 stars. It was like still a really good series for me. And this is kind of on par with that too. Like I really enjoyed my time and I thought it was good and it was like enjoyable. I don't know. I'm running out of things to say about it because it was just fine. And if you're looking for a fantasy that's like has really lyrical writing and is easy to read and for younger readers, then this is for you. It's not anything crazy. But for to wrap it up, Caraval was 4 stars and the other 2 were 3 stars for me. Next, I posted a video where I recently introduced a new series on my channel called Read-alikes, and the first video that I posted was about Love on the Brain by Alia Hazelwood. I wanted to find read-alikes for that book. If you missed that video, please go check it out. All of the books I'm about to talk about, the next 3 books I'm about to talk about, were in that video, so I'm not going to give you like a super in-depth rundown about them because I talk about them a lot in that video. I explain why I chose the books for that video in that video as well. So if you're curious as to why I did, go check that one out. As for my final thoughts, here they are. The first book I read for that video was The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This one's a contemporary rom-com about 2 co-workers who work at a public radio station. It takes place in Seattle, I believe, Pacific Northwest area. Our main character, Shay, has been at the radio station for 10 years, straight out of college, and she shares a deep love of public radio that her father nurtured in her. And unfortunately, her father passed away. So this is kind of her way of like paying homage to him. And our love interest, Dominic, just started as a journalist, fresh out of his master's degree. If you know, you know. And they immediately do not get along with each other at all, of course. Not until after they're forced to work on a project together that might save the radio station, but they don't really have a choice. But the catch is that they have to pretend like they've dated before for this new radio show called The X Talk. And they have not dated before. They barely know each other and they don't like each other. So they end up with this fake exes podcast situation. And of course, they get to know each other from there and sparks begin to fly. I thought this one was pretty fun. It was a decent listen on audiobook. Of course, I listened to this one on audio because it's about a podcast and a radio show. But I didn't really believe the characters and I didn't really root for their relationship that much. In fact, I thought it was really a huge missed opportunity for Rachel Lynn Solomon not to actually make them exes in the first place. Like, there could have been a whole storyline where Shay dated somebody in public radio and then he went off and did his thing, got his master's degree or whatever, and then he shows back up and they're like, oh shit, we actually did date. And then they have this other plot device that causes them to have the radio show. I don't understand. Like, that was such a missed opportunity for me, and I could not get over that the whole time. So I feel like that's why I didn't really connect to the characters that much. You will begin to see that this is a big issue for me with romance books. Like, if I don't like the characters and I don't really believe them and I don't really care about their relationship, I'm gonna knock like a whole star off of my rating because what am I doing here, you know? So I didn't really think that it added anything to the plot to make them fake exes. Like, the actual book that she ended up writing because of that plot premise was fine, but like I said, it could have been so much better. So yeah, I don't know. I ended up giving it a 3 stars. It was, fine while I was listening to it, but I don't really remember anything about it, and I don't find myself thinking about it afterwards. So yeah, it was fine. The next book that I read was To Sir with Love by Lauren Lane. This one's another rom-com. It's set in New York City, and our main character, Gracie, owns a champagne shop that she inherited when her father passed away. It's like their family small business. She has 2 siblings that don't want anything to do with the champagne shop, and so she, takes responsibility and runs it on her own. We open the book discussing her recent online dating life, which involves this like app where you meet people anonymously and just like write back and forth to each other. And so that is where she met Sir, who she has been writing to, and they're having this just little nice romantic time. Very shortly after we learn about this, she meets a man named Sebastian Andrews, who she immediately is attracted to, but then she finds out that he is the owner of the building that she rents out for her champagne business, and he's trying to buy it off her, of course. They don't get along, but they can't deny their attraction for each other, and then they start to spend more time together. But Gracie's like, oh, I kind of like Sebastian, but what about Sir? Like, she is going back and forth between these two opportunities, but there's also some subplots going on of like things going on with her family, things going on in her personal life, her passion that she has is art, so she's like got this whole other thing going on. So she ends up, you know, balancing a lot of things. And of course, there's also this little kind of, are Sarah and Sebastian the same person? Maybe? This was a really fun, flirty, romantic little romp through Manhattan. I really liked the setting. I really liked there was a lot of talk about food and a lot of drinking wine and a lot of just like family togetherness, fun time. And the banter between the two main characters was pretty good. But again, I didn't feel that like they have to be together or I will die, you know? But I do think that these characters, all of the characters, even the side ones, they had like very vulnerable and mature emotional conversations about what was going on in their lives. And they didn't like just make really stupid decisions like sometimes people in rom-coms do. So I really appreciated it for that because I like when a book can be real, and I felt like this one was. And also this one was no spice, if I remember correctly, which is actually really nice. The older I get, the more I realize that I don't want to read in-depth spicy scenes every single time I pick up a romance. I don't know. It's there's only so much of it, and I have to be in the right mood for it. So I enjoyed that this one wasn't in my face about it. You know, I did give this one 3 stars as well because I had a good time, and but I didn't really feel like it was any better, like miles and miles better than the other two that I read. So yeah, check this one out. Okay, so the final book that I read for that video was The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This is my second Christina Lauren that I've ever read, and I can definitely safely say that I will read more of them because I like their writing. I think it's really fun. I like the dynamic that they have, and you can kind of feel it in their writing. In this one, we follow Jess, who's a single mom, and she's also a statistician, and she's just trying to make ends meet, and she lives with her grandparents who help her take care of her kid, and she has her best friend, Felicity, who she nicknames Fizzy, so that's kind of fun. They have really good banter together. She and Fizzy end up getting involved in this DNA duo thing through this company called Genetically, which I don't want to spoil the plot for you, so I won't tell you really how it gets there, but basically Jess finds herself submitting her like spit so she can get genetic testing done on it to find out if she has a soulmate in the system. Basically what the algorithm does is that it takes your genetic information and matches it to other people who are in the database, and sees if you are genetically compatible with each other. So that's kind of the little gimmick that the app is based on. So basically, she does it as kind of a joke and forgets about it. And then she gets a message that she and the creator of the company are like a 94%, something like that. Very high, improbably high percent match that they could be soulmates, basically. And she has met this guy, and she's like, no, I don't think so. I don't like him, of course. And basically, she gets the opportunity to be paid to see if they have a connection because, you know, the company is interested in this. It could be really good for them. And so they pay her to do that. And of course, they spend time together, and, you know, things happen. This one was quite piney. It was steamy. It was funny. They're like almost instantly after they're both like, yeah, I don't like you, they switch over to like this, I want to rip your clothes off, which is interesting and not quite believable again. But after we get past that point, there are some really tender moments in the romance, and I feel like they were the two that I liked the most, like together out of all of these that I read. And I like the family dynamics that are going on. I enjoyed my time with it. I read it really quickly, and yeah, I liked it. I also gave this one 3 stars because again, I didn't feel like it had to be more than the other books that I read. I feel like they were all pretty on par with each other. I had a good time with those. So after that video, I read another graphic novel this month called Swimming in Darkness by Lucas Harari. I think I found out about this one from NPR. I believe that this is translated from French, and so it was like newer translated from last year. Um, it follows the story of a man named Pierre who he's like an architecture student, but he is working on his thesis and then he drops out of architecture school, but he still wants to go visit the hot springs that were built by the architect that he was writing his thesis about. So he goes to where the hotel is that have the hot springs in the Swiss Alps, and he visits them and he's just hanging out, and he meets some like shady characters, and then he meets some nice characters, and then he meets somebody that could be a love interest, but then he experiences something super crazy and he begins to lose his mind a little bit. I like this one. I thought it was fun. I really liked the art style. It was very shadowy, it was very ominous, and the art style was like all reds, blues, and blacks. So it was just really vibey. The way the story left off, it gave me like a very uneasy but also kind of a hopeful vibe. So that was super interesting. But it was like a short story. Like it was less than 200 pages. So it was, yeah, I don't know. Very interesting. I liked it. I mean, I think I gave this one 3 stars as well. It was a good one. Obviously didn't like it as much as the Tea Dragon Society, but it wasn't meant to be like, you know, that type of book for me. But I'm glad I read it. I'm enjoying spending more time with graphic novels so far this year. So it was good. This month, I posted another video where I purchased 3 blind dates with books and I opened them on camera and I read them for you. And it was very, very, very fun. That was one of the videos that I have been wanting to do forever, like since before I even posted my first video. So I'm super happy with that one. And overall, I feel good about the books that we read. I own all these blind dates with books, which is awesome because I can show you. The first book that I read and unwrapped was The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. This book is almost 1,000 pages long. Doesn't really look it, but it is. And it's also very floppy, which I actually really liked, and I found myself picking it up physically a lot. I also listened to it on audiobook, and the audiobook is 42 hours long. So this was a really big accomplishment for me this month. And when I tell you, when I opened this and I was like, what the hell? The first book that I opened for this video is 1,000 pages long. It took me a really long time. It took me up basically all of February to get that video done, but I'm glad I did because this book was an experience. This is one that I've always seen like around at the library, but I've never been like, oh, let me put that on my TBR. I'm going to read that one day. So in this, we follow multiple characters, but it's from an omniscient perspective and it goes chronologically, so it's not super hard to follow. We just kind of are like picked up and dropped into different people's lives, but then they all kind of come together. So it's not like a very like grueling book to read. There's Tom Builder and his family. They're kind of a blended family because when his wife dies, he marries a new woman, and that's very interesting. And then we have Prior Philip, who becomes the new prior of Kingsbridge, where this takes place, most of it. And he is on a mission to rebuild the church because it's in shambles. So that's his thing. Then we have Aliena, who is the daughter of the Earl of Shiring, but then the Earl gets disgraced and she has to take care of her little brother and try to avenge her father. And she has a lot going on, but she is a badass female character. And then there's also the villain named William Hamley, who I fucking hate. And I was pissed. I was pissed off whenever we were reading about him. Like, I swear to God, I literally wanted to throw this book across the room. So yeah, about 25% of the book, we meet everybody, and then we see them all start to come together. So the rest of the book is takes place throughout their lifetimes. So we meet another generation, basically, of people who are working on this cathedral and doing all these things. Murder, political intrigue, curses, travel, monastic life, true love, heartbreak, like everything you can think of. It is truly epic. Like there's a lot going on here. For such a long book, it was pretty easy to get engrossed in and like just sit down and read. And I really enjoyed my time with it. Like I truly did. but I also think that my time with it was way too long. My issue with this, I gave it 4 stars overall. My issue with this, and the reason I did not give it 5 stars, is because it was just way too fucking long. Like, there were certain scenes that we did not need to actually see happen in person. Like, they could have been referred to in the future or the past or whatever, like, oh yeah, this happened, and then we move on and we do something a little bit more exciting. No, there were like scenes of battle, like whole chapters of battle. There were whole chapters of like Prior Philip trying to figure out what to do when there's an issue with building and where to get the stone from and why we can't get it from the quarry and blah 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 blah, all this stuff. And then like William Hamley is trying to like sabotage Kingsbridge because he hates everybody who lives there. And time again, we just see Kingsbridge is thriving, and then William Hamley does something stupid, and then they, whatever. And it's like that happens over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, bro, do we really need that? Do we really need all that? And I also think that for all the time we spent with the characters, they could have been way more dynamic. I think they fell really flat for me. I think maybe because there were so many characters, or we spent so much time like doing exposition, or describing other scenes and describing other things about the book, or trying to move the plot forward, that it kind of just felt like the characters didn't really have that much growth by the end of the book, even though, like, I know they did. But I don't know, it was just kind of like some of them didn't. And some of them were like, who are you? Who even are you? I think the ending was pretty satisfying. The very last chapter, I don't understand what happened. But for what investment I had in this book, I think I was happy with the way that it ended, and I had a good time reading it. I'm glad that I read this, and I'm proud of myself for reading this. So, yeah, that was The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. The next book that I read for that video was How to Find Your Way Home by Katie Regan. This book is a family saga. It is about a brother and a sister who grow up in Canby Island in the UK. And so that is breeding ground for them to grow up bird watching. And Stephen, the brother, adores bird watching. Him and his father were very into it when they were close. And so it's become like a really integral part of who he is. Emily is the little baby sister, and we see some of their upbringing. And then we flash forward and we find out that Stephen is now homeless, and Emily works for the housing council or whatever. So she actually like helps homeless people find homes. And so that's where their paths converge after they have spent many years with no contact. They became estranged. So the book is kind of split between the past of what happened, and the present, like what's actually happening now. So we see how they got there, and then what they do after they reunite, and how they reconcile things that happened in the past to get where they got today. Basically, something really terrible happened that caused Stephen to go to prison, and that's why he ended up being homeless. And then we find out like the reason why that happened. There's a plot twist, and it made me realize that I didn't really like the characters that much. Like, when we were getting to know them, I was like, okay, there's still time, like they're fine. And then that happened, and I was like, okay, they actually both suck, and one of them kind of sucks more than the other. I thought it was pretty well written, but for such a tender and family oriented story, it didn't touch me in the way that I wanted it to. And so I was a little bit disappointed by that, and thus I gave it 3 stars. But I'm glad that I read this and I had the opportunity to read it, because I'd never heard of this before. So that was what I wanted out of the video that I did, was to be able to read something I had never seen or heard of before. And I did, and I read it pretty quickly too. So yeah, it just wasn't really as touching as I thought it was going to be, but it was pretty good. All right, the last book I read for that video was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This was my first Emily Henry, which is funny because I think this is her like least liked book. So I was like, okay, let's read her least liked book, and if I like it, then that's really good, and then I can read the rest of her books. and the great news is that I did really, really like it. This book is about Poppy and Alex, and they are best friends. They met in college, and every summer they go on vacation together. And basically what the book is again alternating chapters of the past and the present. So we see them go on all their previous vacations together in different places, which was super, super fun. And then we figure out like how they got to not speaking, and then they take another vacation together. Like Poppy somehow persuades Alex to go on another vacation with her, and so she wants it to be perfect so they can get back to where they were. But of course there is some tension, and you can guess where the tension comes from. But yeah, it's a friends to lovers story. Basically we just learned that their favorite parts of their trips together were each other, and it's very tender. I did really actually like them together. I thought that they had like mature adult conversations, but they could also be really silly with each other and have a good like genuine friendship together. And I always think that the best relationships come from friendships, so I have no problem with friends to lovers at all. Emily Henry's writing was really, really fun. It was very, very easy to read, and I just didn't want to put it down at all. And I really liked her humor, and even though it's kind of millennial humor, and I'm not a millennial, but I mean, I had a really good time with this book. There were times where I was like I thought it was a little bit cheesy sometimes, but this is by no means the cheesiest romance I've ever read. I just thought sometimes Poppy and Alex were like being doofuses, and I was like, I don't know, should you all really be friends? You know, I don't know, but for the most part, they were really good together, and I really liked it. And I liked the traveling; that was super fun. The different destinations they went to, and I pretty much liked everything about it. I don't really have any like critiques about it. I just didn't really get like a 5-star feeling from it, so I didn't give it 5 stars. Other than like sometimes I feel like Poppy's expectations were just a little unrealistic, and she wasn't very in touch with herself. But I can't place blame on the book for that. Like that's just the way that we are, that humans are sometimes. So it was 4 stars. I really liked it, and I'm super, super looking forward to reading more Emily Henry. You can count on seeing me read more Emily Henry soon. So that's awesome. Yay. Okay. The last 3 books I read this month were part of February's Diverse Baseline Challenge. So basically, if you don't know what the Diverse Baseline Challenge is, it's a Storygraph challenge that encourages readers to read at least 3 books by BIPOC authors per month. The goal is to build the habit of searching out and supporting BIPOC authors and reading more of their work and learning some more about yourself and about other people's cultures in the process, which is super awesome. So you can go ahead and check out the Diverse Baseline by just visiting the link in my description. So the first prompt for February was to read a book by a Black author, which is pretty easy. I wanted to read The Weight of Blood for this prompt, but then I was wrapping up books for our Blind Date with Books display at the library, and I was using books that don't circulate very often, and this book was one of them, and that is That Dangerous Energy by Aya de Leon. I'd never heard of this one before either, and it looks really fun because the the back cover says it's a gripping feminist heist fiction about turning the tables on the disaster capitalists in the jaws of the climate apocalypse. I really liked this, but it also fell a little bit flat for me because it wasn't as feminist as I would have liked. The writing also was a little bit wishy-washy in that sometimes it was really good and it was very entertaining to read the whole time, but sometimes it was like weird. Like the characters' voices sounded the exact same, and there were some times where I was just like, did you really write that on the page? You know? I don't know. This was super fun. It was glamorous. It was unique. It was really fast paced. And it was really surprisingly like action packed and thrilling, which is pretty interesting. What we've got going on is Morgan is the main character, and she is a like a textile designer and an artist living in New York City. And she meets one day somehow this billionaire named Sebastian, another billionaire named Sebastian, which is kind of funny actually. And she basically like gets him to fall in love with her and bankroll her so she can pursue her dreams of being a textile artist and make this really beautiful quilt. Um, It's kind of a whole thing. So she's dating Sebastian, but she also meets this guy named Kevin, who is a climate activist, and they meet while they're like in the airport for a delayed flight. They're going to the same place, and they meet and they get to know each other, and they spend a really fun night together. But then things kind of fall apart when he finds out who she's dating, and she finds out what Sebastian's company is doing, and they basically have this like really sketchy thing going on, and she didn't realize how much greenwashing they were doing and how much like bad stuff they were doing with their company. So when she finds some dirt on Sebastian, she reaches out to Kevin and she's like, hey, can you use this? And Kevin is like, oh, I don't know. And then basically they come up with a plan to spy on Sebastian from the inside because she's moved in with him. And so it's like this kind of crazy heist drama because she's trying to get dirt on him and avoid like getting in trouble. And then it gets crazy. Like at the end, it gets crazy, like very dramatic. Um, that is where things started to fall apart for me a little bit. It was fast paced, but the pacing got a little bit weird at the end. And things were like, I don't know. It was like, it was just weird. There were like weird things. Like, there was a kidnapping. There was like this really crazy train chase scene. I don't know. There's just like all this crazy shit going on. That was very like, I had to suspend my disbelief a lot. But it was actually really fun. It wasn't, but like I said, it wasn't as feminist as all of that. It was really more just kind of like a fun time. And I gave it a 3 stars because I just felt like it was a little bit all over the place. Like, I couldn't tell which direction the plot was going to go. Some of the characters sounded the same. Like, they all had kind of the same voice. Like, Sebastian and Kevin sounded exactly the same. Like, they would say kind of the same type of things to Morgan, which I thought was a little weird. And there was just kind of like a surface level inconsistent vibe because at times it was really, really rousing, and at other times it was just kind of flat. So yeah. But the idea and the energy were there, so I thought this was a worthwhile read. You should definitely pick it up because it was fun as hell and very unexpected and an underdog to be frank. So yeah, that was That Dangerous Energy. Then I read As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katour. This is one of the books from my 24 books I wanted to read in 2024. So I did one so far, which is great. And this one was also for the prompt B, which was to read a historical fiction by a BIPOC author. This one is set in the Syrian Revolution, which started in 2011. So it's not like really that historical, but it is like cataloged and categorized as a historical fiction. So I thought it works. Okay, we follow Salama, who is a 18-year-old pharmacy student, and well, she's a pharmacy student when the revolution starts. And by the time we meet her, she's working in a hospital as a doctor because she's one of the only people with enough medical knowledge to help the amount of patients that are being injured and killed every day in Syria. So she's got a lot on her plate. She's taking care of her sister-in-law who is pregnant with her brother's baby. Her brother and her father have been captured by the military for being traitors. And her mom died. So she's got a lot of shit going on. And while all of this is happening, she's trying to decide whether to leave Syria so that she and her niece and her sister-in-law will be safe, or to stay and do her duty as a doctor because nobody else really can. So she has so much grief going on, so much trauma, that she begins to hallucinate like this man who is basically her conscience outside of her body. And she knows that she's seeing somebody, so she's a little worried, but she's suffering from an intense amount of trauma. It's really, really sad. The narrator for this book is very angry. You can tell how much emotion and how much anguish this character is going through the narrator. And at times it was so intense that I couldn't even just like put it on and listen to it. Like, I have to kind of psych myself up to listen to it. But despite all of the bad stuff that's happening, she meets this boy named Kinan, who she finds out she was actually supposed to meet on the day the revolution started, because like her parents were trying to hook them up so they could get married. And they meet and they begin to like form a companionship, which is actually really sweet. And there's like a little bit of a romance. Well, the story kind of takes a turn towards romance after they meet, and the romance does lighten things up a bit for sure. And it's also like a halal romance, which is really really sweet and like really cool representation to see. I do agree with those who are critiquing this book for the lack of political background that's going on in this story. Like, we don't actually learn about why the revolution happened. We don't learn about the powers at play. We just have a very black and white view of it. And I wanted to read this book to learn more about what was happening there. And I didn't really feel like I got that. And I also wish that we got more of a refugee experience. That was something that I assumed we were going to get as part of the story, but we didn't. And I think that also, that representation also needs to be shared, like in this type of a story. There's also a lot of people who critique the Studio Ghibli references and like the lemon references. Those don't really bother me at all. It's a YA book, so it's supposed to have a little bit of buoyancy to it, and that was fine. Like, I'm not really a Studio Ghibli fan, so I think it mostly just went over my head anyway. This book was really really hard to read, but it did pique my interest in learning more about the Syrian Revolution and like the conflict that was going on at that time, and the conflict that's still going on to this day. We are privileged as readers to even be able to read and live in a country where we can have access to whatever books we want, more or less. And so that's why I use my privilege to read stuff like this, because it's very important for me to be able to have that frame of reference and learn about those things by using the privilege that I have to do that. So yeah, I thought it was worthwhile for sure. I think I gave this one 3 stars because, you know, it had its issues, but I'm also glad that I read it. Okay, the last book that I read this month was Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This was for the prompt C for February, which is to read a book by a BIPOC author with found family. And this, I could not have chosen a better found family book, I don't think. This one is also YA. It's a sci-fi fantasy set in a country that is based on West Africa, but it's, you know, fictional, obviously. We have Tari Sai, who is the main character, and she grows up in isolation because her mother, the lady, made a deal with a demon, like a jinn, and so she had a baby with this jinn, and they brought forth Tari Sai. So she's like half demon. She has this power where she has to do her mother's bidding for one wish. And her mother wants her to kill the crown prince of Eretzar, who is looking for an imperial council. There's a lot of world building here, so just bear with me, okay? Basically, there's like a magic system going on in this world where we have, you know, jinn and demons and fairies and like spirits and whatever. And then we also have like people have magic. They have powers. They can have powers. The empire consists of like the rulers in the empire consist of basically like the crown prince or the emperor. And then they both have a council of 11 members who make up their like siblinghood, I guess. I don't know. They're linked in a very, very interesting way. Once they make vows to the ruler, they are all linked. Like, every person is linked. So if they spend too much time apart, they get sick. And they also protect the ruler from dying by different ways. That's why there's 11 of them, because there's like 13 different ways you can die or something. And so basically, if you're a member of the council, you can kill the ruler. So the plan is to get Tari Sai to the capital so she can be a candidate for the council membership, so she can get close enough to the ruler's son to kill him, basically. That is what the lady wants. And Tari Sai doesn't know any of this until she goes and stuff happens, and she's like, whoa, what the fuck? And then crazy stuff, like there's just crazy stuff that happens. I'm doing a really bad job of explaining this, but let me tell you, the world building, the magic system, the characters, like the setting was, oh my god, so decadent and so incredible. The plot was really, really interesting. I kind of saw there's a twist, and I saw it coming, but everything else was like really very interesting. It was a really immersive adventure, and I cannot wait to find out what happens in the next book. Let me just tell you, because some shit went down. There was a very climactic ending to this book. I think this is on par with adult fantasy that I've read. It's very interesting to me that it's YA, but I think that mostly has to do with the fact that Tari Sai, I believe, is under 18 for like most of this book. So I think that's why it is the way that it is. But like the writing wasn't like juvenile. It was very, 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 very good. The author of this book is so talented. And like I said, I cannot wait to see what happens next. And I gave this book 4 stars, and I was super happy that I read it. So, yeah. So overall, I really enjoyed this month. I did give a lot of 3 stars out, but I also had some other higher reads, and I got to read my first Emily Henry, and I got to read some books I'd never heard of before, and I got to read some books that were really pleasant surprises, and so I'm really happy with how it turned out. And yeah, I am super excited to continue some of the series that I've been working on, and I'm so glad that I had such a busy and productive month, and I can't wait for you guys to see everything else I've been working on. So yeah, that's all I got for today. So I will see you in my next video, and in the meantime, why don't you like and subscribe, go watch my previous videos and see if you like my channel, like hanging out here with me. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'd love to see you next time. And that's a wrap. I will see you